Hi, friends. Welcome back to our Monday evening. Oh, for dying out loud. I am one of your hosts, Angie Cat, and I am your magical life midwife. And joining me today is my bestie, Laura Shaw. Yeah.
I am your divine death doula.
Yay. I love that.
Yeah.
Do you prefer death doula or end of life doula? Does it matter?
It makes absolutely no difference to me.
Okay. I can see where end of life doula is very much more compassionate and gentle, whereas death doula just like rock out, man. I'm a death doula. That's not the name of our new band. It's not.
Right. Actually, so there's many names, including end of life midwife and death midwife. And so there's just like all of these different names. So I really have absolutely no preference. It's really about someone else's comfort level of what it is they want to call me. Hey, you, that works.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Right. Yeah. Can you take care of this over here for me? Because I don't know what's going on. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's great to know. And I agree with you. I think it really is a comfort level. And it sort of speaks to the idea that the more that we can, I mean, we are irreverent about it, but I think that's part of the mission is because if we can infuse a little irreverence in it, then maybe people won't be so scared and uptight to talk about it. Right. So that's our hope anyway. So tonight Laura and I have been talking about what's, how do we continue the conversation? And so we thought we would talk about, last time we talked about grief and, had some tears over that, which is really, I mean, I think it's a beautiful, beautiful topic. And we may come back around to that because that's just something that it's an ongoing process. But part of that grief process also is forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
So, death doula, death midwife, talk to us a little bit about your experience with forgiveness, your take on it.
Yeah, so I think it's important, first of all, to say that there are two pieces, I think, especially at end of life specifically. So there is the piece about forgiving ourselves, and there is the piece of hoping that someone else will forgive us. So it's a really something that I've seen as people near the end of life, and sometimes it's something that they hang on for to try to resolve some issue. And it can be something like maybe they had a really tumultuous relationship with one of their children, and sometimes they want to try to make amends.
Sure.
And it becomes problematic, and I know in my own lived experiences with my family and people who've died, it can be really triggering. And I'd like to go out right away and say, you don't owe anyone forgiveness just because they're dying. I have different thoughts on why I think that forgiveness, because forgiveness is for you, not for them. But at the end of life, when someone wants to make amends and that other person is unwilling to give them that opportunity, it can really stop them and their energetic flow to, leaving this transition.
Okay.
And so something that a doula is really equipped for, that maybe family members aren't equipped for, is helping them navigate the dying person, helping them navigate what they can do. So if that is write a letter, if it is dictate a letter, if it is make a recording or a video, with the understanding that that other person never has to watch it if they choose not to or to read it, but they at least have the opportunity to make their own healing. So as far as end of life goes, I think it's important that we recognize that just because a person is dying, I know that that can be very triggering for people, especially if they were abusive, if the person who's dying was an abusive person.
Right.
So I'm certainly not saying that we owe that person any sort of like, oh, everything's fine and perfect and wonderful, because that's, to me, that's not what forgiveness is.
Right.
So,
Totally.
right. So I always try to start off with any doula clients and their families with an first understanding of forgiveness as a concept.
Sure.
Uh,
It's a good place
so
to start, I think.
right. So I guess in most people's world, I imagine, and you can share your thoughts with me, forgiveness is often seen as letting go and accepting the thing that has happened to you as a thing and like that's fine or whatever.
Right.
uh yeah, and I have a different version of forgiveness, I think. um
I think I agree with you on that. And that I do think that that's a common theme or a myth around forgiveness. So tell us what your perspective is on what forgiveness really is.
yeah, so I don't know where this comes from, but from a very, very young age, I have always known that forgiveness isn't about the person who did something to me or who enacted something on somebody. So in my form of forgiveness, it is really about taking away the electric charge or the power that somebody else has in my life. So if that is something as horrible as someone assaulted one of my children, I feel like for me, forgiveness isn't that it was acceptable or that I even ever want to see that human being again,
Right.
but it's that I don't wish actively for their death. Like
Right.
I just have
Yeah.
taken all, like I refuse to give them that control or power anymore. And in my own head, I have come to the place that it's like it was a thing, it happened, and now we just deal with that. So I think that the most powerful piece of forgiveness is first agreeing with what you think that means.
Right.
Yeah, so I'm not much of a vengeance person. I probably
Right.
was more when I was younger. And now I just don't see any purpose. I just know that karmically, and I suppose you of all people would know this better than me, and many others, that karmically there are lessons for other people to learn. And if I was the victim of something somebody did, I can forgive them, so that I can be at peace and not let that control me.
Absolutely.
And then
Absolutely.
karma
I'm
takes care of them.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, there's so many layers to this too, depending on your belief system, right? And I think you've touched on something. I mean, from my perspective, I see it also that way. And I see it like two distinct parts to the situation that happened, the harm that ever happened, is that there is, you have to separate it out. Forgiveness doesn't mean everything is swept under the rug. It's all good. It's all fine. The thing happened, and we have to we can't argue with reality. The pain happened, the hurt happened. It may have affected you for the rest of your life, but it's our responsibility to take that pain and alchemize it into some sort of healing for us. That other person cannot do that for us. They can forgive us or they can ask for forgiveness, still doesn't take care of the healing process that we are responsible for. And I know that's hard to hear because we're going to sit there and say, well, they hurt me, they should be responsible.
Mhm.
They have their part in it. They can have an active part in your healing, but ultimately that's up to you because they may ask for forgiveness and you may choose to block it and say, I don't accept it. And then
Right.
you are an active participant in that process, which is I'm blocking my own healing.
Right.
Right. So, so I think that I think you're right. I mean, I think there's the thing that we have to navigate and deal with. And then we have our healing, and it's about two different people, and there's just so many different layers to it. And I believe first and foremost forgiveness is for us. I mean, we've heard that old adage that to not to hold grudges or to wish ill of someone or to not grant forgiveness or give forgiveness is like drinking poison, their
Right.
poison, right?
Every
And
day.
so it's about reclaiming our power. That's what it is.
Mhm.
Is I am, if you can't give me that closure if you can't say you're sorry or what have you, or even if you do. My part in the forgiveness piece is to be able to accept that I can claim my power, reclaim that. You don't get to hijack that for me, and take responsibility for what healing I can do.
Right.
And some of that healing may involve setting such hard boundaries as I will not be speaking to you ever again.
Yep.
But, so there is that. And in some instances, that is the very healthiest thing that you can do. But also checking in with yourself. And this is not, I think people need to also understand, and you would back me up on this, forgiveness isn't a one and done thing.
Right.
This is an active process that may take some years, but it's continually checking in with yourself. And there was a friend of mine who is a Center for Spiritual Living pastor, and he talked about it this way. He said, I knew that I had reached forgiveness when I could think about this person and not be triggered, and actually, like, if that name crossed my mind, I could be in a state of peace and go, I hope that they are well. I hope that they are well. I don't want to be with them. I don't want to have any interaction with them. My life is fine without them, but I hope that they are well, because at the root of it, we are all faulty human beings. Right. So that's my take on forgiveness. From the spiritual realm, from what I've learned, is that, and this is where it gets really hard, I think, for people, depending on spiritual beliefs, is that, like you touched on it, is that sometimes these hurts and these things that happen to us are because that was a lesson that had been set up a long time ago. There's a thing, if you're interested, Carolyn Mace writes a book about soul contracts. And there's a lot of conversation around that sometimes we decide as a soul body, before we reincarnate into this plane of existence, these are the lessons I came here to learn. And so and if you're not sure what lessons you need to learn, simply look at the patterns of the repeating things that happen to you, right? Or the repeated people that you keep attracting into your life. And if you're asking yourself, why does that happen? Because there's a lesson to be learned there. So for me personally, that has helped immensely in my forgiveness process, is to go, yep, I have actually somebody that I have blocked completely from my life. I do not wish him ill harm. I don't wish him, I hope that he is well cared for, and that he knows he's loved, whatever. I just want him to be at his best, but I don't want him in my life. And that part of, I got to that place by recognizing that, and I can say this, he brought me an immense gift. He brought me an immense gift, because had I not gone through that experience, I would continue to play out the same patterns over and over and over again. And so there's that piece of it, of forgiveness for me personally, is, can you see the gift of that scenario? Now, I know there's going to be people that will probably listen to that and go, there's no gift in being an abused child.
Right.
There's no gift, in being abandoned. On the surface, no. On the surface, no, absolutely not. But again, how many more years are you going to carry that with you?
Right.
And continually re-trigger yourself, because that's what it is doing when we don't forgive them, and we don't forgive ourselves for holding the grudge, or for whatever our part was, if there was a part, you know what I mean?
Yes.
So,
well, and I like what you say about replaying the lesson and learning something from it. So the thing that I think I've taken away from in my lifetime of hurts, or of events that have happened, one of the things that I do look for is the lesson. And even if it's just so that I can say that it makes me a better human being towards other people. So understand a situation that I wouldn't have other, like, I'm not excited about some of the things that I've gone through.
Yeah.
And I can still understand the value that having firsthand experience can make me a more empathic
Yes.
and thoughtful human.
Yep.
And it helps me grow. So I
Totally.
think that that's a really important thing. So at end of life, what
Mhm.
happens in the transitional pieces, kind of before transition actually, is oftentimes people are looking for that. They're looking for either forgiveness or
Mhm.
they're looking to forgive somebody else.
Right.
And it's kind of this beautiful lesson that, again, maybe that's how I got to this space where I can do this in my active life before I'm at the
Mhm.
end. Um, but I think it's really important. And many of the people that I have been in that space with, it is a lot about forgiving themselves.
Mhm.
So um, I think that sometimes as human beings,
Mhm.
we we hold ourselves to this really rigid standard. Like, I have apologized. My oldest child did not get the best version of me. I was very young. Had no idea what I was doing. I didn't. And so I know that I have carried guilt in my life for not being the parent who raised my youngest is definitely a different human than the parent who raised my oldest, which I think is probably true. You know, I have had a relationship with my parents in the past where it took time for me to mend that and recognize that um, they were humans doing the best that they could at that time with whatever where they
Right.
came from, what they had. My parents are wonderful. Certainly, I'm not.
Yeah,
They
just say
weren't
that
terrible.
disclaimer because this is
That's
going to be
right.
posted on the
Just in case,
interwebs.
right? Mom and Dad, you're lovely, and I love you. So, um, right. And so, but a lot of times in this space of death, people do. I've seen two things happen where
Mhm.
sometimes people are like absolutely shut down. They don't want to acknowledge or talk about it, which is a really hard death. It's hard for the family. It's hard for the person transitioning.
Right.
And that is unfortunate, which a doula can really, anybody actually, a spiritual leader, a faith leader, anybody can try to help. A doula is really good at this too. And so there's that, which can be very hard. But the beautiful healing that I have seen come from, a parent and child reconnecting, or family members who haven't spoken for years, being able to have even just a small interaction.
Mhm.
Um, it's such a gift that for both the person who's dying, but also for the person who will remain.
Sure.
Because sometimes I think we don't know, like, if you're estranged from your family, I am not advocating that you have to reach out to them.
No, no, no,
Um,
no.
and I hope that people are at least really thoughtful
Mhm.
about um, if it is the end of your life,
Mhm.
you get to identify who you want in it,
Right.
how you want, like, if they're not bringing you peace, don't have them there just
Totally.
because you're related.
Right.
um but it all speaks to forgiveness, and I absolutely know that I can forgive somebody um and wish them absolutely nothing, and be kind of indifferent actually, or
Mhm.
mostly indifferent, um and still gain that piece of myself back. And that I have seen some beautiful things at end of life where people have experienced that, or at least been able to write the words or say the words or record the
Mhm.
words so that the person can do with it whatever they want,
Right.
um,
Right.
because they don't owe you. Like, if I have wronged somebody, they don't owe me anything. I owe them,
Right. Right.
and they can listen or not. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
forgiving yourself is big.
Yeah, it is because ultimately, like you said, everybody is a flawed human being. And that adage that we hear a lot of, hurt people, is so very true. And to your point too, there have been instances where I have come to a forgiveness, the beautiful thing for me is that it does open that empathy, because I guarantee you will come in contact with someone else who is similar, who
Mhm.
may try to hurt you or actively hurt you in a similar way. I mean, that's a possibility. I'm not saying it always will be that way, but when I'm able to look at that person and go, this happened to me, this is my experience, I now have, through that forgiveness, the ability to see things from both sides. So when I see somebody else, two other people that are experiencing the same thing, perhaps, it's an interesting thing, because now I can sit back and go, oh, I see why that person did the hurting, because they have their own pain that they're navigating.
Right.
And and I can see where the other person, why they're holding the grudge, or they're not giving the forgiveness. I mean, it is a complex thing, but when you're able to step outside of your situation and see someone else's, you know it sometimes is a little easier through the eyes of forgiveness to see that there's two different stories here.
Right. Right.
And I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, but most people, when they approach that transition, I mean, as we age, we know what we did. We're not proud of it. We want to have forgiveness. We want to make amends for that. And so I think that's, if we know that that's a big piece of the healing process. And if we can just get to that place where, again, it doesn't make the action okay, but in this time of active transition back to the spirit realm, that's baggage we don't need to take with us. And interestingly enough, though, I've had this happen multiple times, where I will connect with someone on the other side for a sitter who's come for a reading, and they will still reach out and want to, say they're sorry and make amends. So, and they have that perspective on the other side too, that it's like, even though they know over there that that was a role that they played, that was a part of the lesson and the journey that they had to play a part of for you, they're still going to come through and try and make amends. Why? Because it's good for you. It's good for you
I
to
love
be
that.
able to, because they know that when they're making that transition, it's not good to carry that baggage. And quite frankly, you can't take it with you. You're going to go over there and you're going to see what immense healing there is. And so they want that same experience for you. So if they can reach out and make amends with you, hopefully the idea is that if you can feel that, then you will leave your baggage behind when you're getting ready to transition too.
Do you ever experience, just out of curiosity, have you ever experienced someone in that situation that's like, no, I will not talk to them. Like, I don't want to hear from them.
No, not yet. I mean, that's
Okay.
certainly a very real possibility, and I respect that, and when I do my readings, I will tell people, if someone comes through and you're uncomfortable with that conversation, or you don't want to connect with them, you just let me know and I will let them know. And I just say, I'm sorry, they're not ready. Can you please step aside and let the next person in? And so I respect that. And
Okay.
they do too. They understand that maybe you're not ready to have that connection, and that's totally fine. That's
Right.
totally fine. But just know that they're always, I mean, and even if you don't, here's an interesting story. So I did, this was before I really kind of narrowed my focus to mediumship, but I was doing a psychometry reading for a young woman, and she gave me her keys. And as I sat there with my eyes closed, I could see this really kind of a dark cloud hovering over her, like guarding her, but it wasn't malevolent. It was very benevolent, but it was this dark cloud. And the more I felt into that, I told her, I said, I see that there's this darkness that is around you. And I said, I get the impression that it is someone from your past who has hurt you deeply. And they know that. And now they're trying to make amends for that by protecting you and supporting you. And she just burst into tears. She's like, I know exactly who that is. That's my dad. and I know, and I can feel that he's protecting me. So it doesn't matter whether you forgive them or not, quite frankly, because when they're over on the other side, they're still watching out for you. They're still near you. They're still, helping you, guiding you, because that's what pure love is. That's what our soul tribe is all about, is we're walking each other home. And so, whether that person on this earth plane tripped you on the journey home, on the other side, they're going to be like, yep, sorry, I tripped you. Now let me help you get here as beautifully as possible. So it is an interesting thing. But yeah, if somebody comes through and they don't want to talk to him, I honor that. So
I love that. I love that you already have that built in. That
Yeah.
it's like, nope, here's your consent. It's
Right.
the idea of consent, even in when someone's coming from the other side to talk to
Right.
you.
Because we can't, even no one can really, what do I say? They can't force your healing process. They can be a part of it. They can be an active part of it or an inactive part of it. But the only person that's going to heal you is you. And I think that's the hardest part about this whole forgiveness thing, is we think, because here's the other thing, somebody may make amends or do everything they can to make amends. That doesn't mean that you're fully healed. You may even say to yourself, I forgive you, but there's still an emotional, energetic imprint. And regardless of whether that's been forgiven or not, there's still healing that only you can affect.
Right.
So, that's the tricky piece that people don't realize about forgiveness, is that, yes, you can grant forgiveness, you can accept forgiveness, or none of the above, but your healing is still your healing, and that's your responsibility.
I think it's an important thing too, as we, part of the reason we even started this was to talk about death, dying,
Right.
but also about living. Like, soulfully living is such an amazing thing. And I know that in my own experiences, I have definitely had those struggles, and I cannot say enough for licensed therapists. So I'm an
Amen,
advocate.
sister.
Everyone, go get
Yes.
a therapist.
Highly recommended.
Right.
Yes.
Try 50 of them until you find the right one. But get
Right.
there. So I had this amazing therapist. I went to her for, I don't know, 15 years.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, this is me mentally well, everyone. So
Yay.
congratulations. But I remember something that she always did was put it into a perspective for me. And it was, no matter what the situation, and I see the same thing with forgiveness, in that if my child did that, could I forgive them? And so far in my life, so when I'm considering whether or not to forgive myself or forgive anybody, I believe in unbreakable, undeniable, complete and total love. I just do.
Yes.
And I absolutely believe that there's nothing my children could do that I wouldn't forgive them for. It doesn't mean I wouldn't hold them accountable. It doesn't mean there's not
Right.
consequences. It doesn't
Right.
mean that it would be all kumbaya. It just means that there's just absolutely nothing that I couldn't forgive my children for. And so whenever I really struggled for some time after my friend died, that what my role was that day, and how could I forgive myself? It was a real challenge for, I don't know, probably over a year. And I think I just had to get to that place where I realized that I played a part in on that day, the day that she chose to end her life. And it didn't, I had to forgive myself, because otherwise there was nothing but poison in me, which means it's like trying to grow a garden in rocky, poisonous soil. You will get nothing but rocky, poisonous plants, and nothing good will grow.
Yeah.
And so I think that is, it's such a such a lesson that has inspired my life. And also, it inspires me when I go into the situation where someone is dying, or into a family where someone has been diagnosed. And part of that anger is it can be at a spiritual belief. It can be, which, I'm not here to tell you you shouldn't be mad about something, um, or about cancer, or a diagnosis, or about your failing body, if that's what it is. And I love that moment. It's often easier for the person who's dying
Mhm.
to get to a space of forgiveness
Right.
where they find peace. And it's
Mhm.
such a beautiful, powerful emotion
Yeah.
that it just informed me that, wow, what if we could learn to do that for ourselves before we're here at the very end?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that kind of segues kind of into the second half of this, is that, forgiveness when we're talking in the context of death and the transition of dying, there's the forgiveness piece of this person who's dying. I'm not sure if I can forgive. How do I do that? The person who's dying is wanting forgiveness or wanting to make amends. But then what about those individuals who are left behind, who are not forgiving themselves? I should have done more, should have been there more. I mean, when I talked to my grandfather right before he went into hospice, I hadn't seen him for a long time. I had no really good excuse other than life,
Right?
and didn't get away very often, and didn't have a lot of vacation time, or what other stupid excuse. See, and you're already hearing me doing it again. But I called him up to, say my goodbyes. And I told him, I said, I am just so sorry that I did not make more time to come and see you. And he was just like this beautiful angel. He's just, oh, honey, don't you even think about that. Don't worry about that at all. And of course, that just made me cry more, because he had already forgiven me. Right. But I was left with that, then there was all those feelings that bubble up, like, oh my God, where am I now in this life with the people in my life already? Am I not spending enough time? And you have to give yourself a break, because you can't do it all. And in some instances, you're not supposed to. You know what I
Right?
mean? We think that, I mean, and let's talk about animals for a moment. Okay. How many of us have beaten ourselves bloody because we've taken our animals in to, help them transition, and we wonder, did we do enough for them? Was it too soon, etc. And the ultimate reality is that the transition, everybody makes that transition into, I believe there is no hell except for the one we create in here and on this planet. But there is no hell on the other side. It is nothing but beautiful coming home. And so we just have to forgive ourselves, because we did what we were supposed to. We did the best we could. And the spirit world knows that. Your
Right?
loved
Right.
ones know that, because you did the best that you could with what you had, with your skill set, with your emotional well-being at that time. And so the quicker you can forgive yourself and find that peace, I think it's easier then to bestow it on others. Would you say?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And animals are a really interesting study, because we have the ability with animals to do something that we don't clearly do with people, which is to choose. Um, and we had this experience with one of our beautiful kitty cats, Georgie,
Mhm.
and we did everything. I mean,
Yeah.
subcutaneous fluids. Like, we are in the bathroom drinking wine, crying, as we're two people holding a cat, trying to give her IV fluids to keep her alive.
Yeah.
And we extended her life for a year. We did.
Wow.
And the truth is that both of us instantly regretted it. After we let her go, it's like, we extended her life not for her. We extended her life for us. Like, that
Right.
it was so, like, it was so awful. Like, and we have sworn we will not do that again
Right.
for any of the animals that come through this life. And people, we do that with people constantly, at end of life, where, it makes sense because we do have
Yeah.
this emotional need for, someone who we've loved for 50 years, or
Yeah.
or whatever. We have that desire to, can't we just, and the truth is that you're right. There is an immense amount of healing in,
Mhm.
like, I have forgiven myself that I selfishly kept Georgie alive for a year by shoving her in a bathroom twice a week, sticking an IV into her at home. Like, it was horrible.
Yeah.
And I understand why I did that, but I
Totally.
also understand that I would never do it again.
Right.
Um,
Right.
because it really was just a band-aid for me to cling on to. It's like when you have a
Yeah.
bad relationship and you just hang on, uh, out of
Yeah.
desperation or something.
Well, because
I
we want to fix it. We want to
Right,
fix
right,
it. And
right.
our healthcare culture now is that, and that's where some of that, unforgiveness towards ourselves is. We know we could pull out all the stops and try and keep them alive for as long as possible. Don't we owe it to them? Well, you know what? Maybe not.
I
I
agree.
mean, my grandfather had, what I really respected and was so in awe about was when he made the decision, you know what? It's my time. I'm done taking these meds. I'm, continuing to go downhill. I'm just this. I'm just going to lay this body down. And he was so clear about that choice and was at such peace about that. Now
Right.
family members could come in and go, oh, no, 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 no. We're going to get you this, 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 this. We're going to keep you alive here. We have to look at quality of life,
Mhm.
and it really needs to be the dying person's, I think, involvement and wishes.
Right, right.
It,
I think I do. I think it's important that, my grandmother went. So I had the honor of taking care of her for a few years before she died. I would stay home with her while I was taking classes, because she couldn't be left alone. She lived with my parents. And I had this great relationship with her, clearly. And she had dementia, and she wasn't always completely lucid.
sure.
And she had some other things. And I remember her saying to me that she was tired. She was tired of being alive, that everyone she knew was dead.
Right.
And, she was in her 80s, and, everyone was dead. And she just wasn't enjoying, like, it's not that she didn't enjoy day-to-day things. We had our routine, we eat, she had a dog, like, we had
Right.
our day-to-day lovely times.
Right.
But she would sometimes say to me, I think I should start drinking and smoking again. Maybe I should go to a tavern. And I would always say, Grandma, I think it's a little late in life to think that smoking now is going to kill you very quick.
Right.
Probably you could, chug it up,
Yeah.
smoke all day. I don't know, 50 packs. I just don't know. But I
Yeah.
remember her getting to that point where she was just like, so,
Yeah.
like, she was ready to lay that
Right.
down. No, she didn't really have what people would deem an underlying, uh, life or death. I mean, it did
Right.
eventually kill her, but not smoking
Right.
or drinking, because that's not what she was doing. But I
Right.
just remember that was such a funny thing for an 80-some-year-old woman in her mid 80s to say. And yet it speaks to the very nature of, I'm done. And no one
Right.
should feel guilty that we aren't doing enough, or that we're not. Um,
Right.
because, yeah, it would have been very easy for us to say, I am sure that there was guilt in, some of my family members. I know my mom felt terrible when it was time to remove her from the home because we couldn't keep her safe there anymore and have her go stay somewhere else. And
Right.
that was a really guilt filled feeling.
Mhm.
Um, and the truth is that she did everything within reason. I mean, at that
Yeah.
point, she wasn't safe at night,
Right.
when she was
Right.
sleeping. So,
Right.
yeah, it is about, knowing that it's okay, that, accepting death, we're all gonna die.
Right.
That sometimes timing isn't our favorite. If,
Right.
uh, maybe we feel like someone's too young, or we didn't do enough. But also the forgiveness piece is huge, like just forgiving ourselves or the family members who made a choice, that
Right.
we feel like, it's
Right.
not always, it's not always a beautiful choice, but it is,
Right.
it's a choice. And I assume no one comes back to you. I love to ask you these questions. I assume no one is coming back from the other side saying, I would like you to tell them that I am so pissed that they chose to unplug the machine. I assume that's just not a conversation you're
Never,
having.
never, ever, ever. Because again, and you and I've talked about this, number one, that's not how they view it. They just don't. They don't, they're not, when they transition, they transition. And once they're over there, they recognize it, even when it's a transition that was unexpected and it was young. They on the other side are not like somebody's killed in a car accident or something, God forbid. They're on the other side. They're not begrudging that. They're not angry about it, because ultimately that was part of the plan. That was part of the plan, unfortunately. It's not good for the people who are left behind who love them, but they have no attachment to that. And you and I've talked about this, it's such a blip on their timeline that it just, why focus on that?
Right.
Let's focus on the happy memories. Let's focus on the beautiful, what's going to happen. We're going to be here to greet you when you transition, so yeah, they don't come through with any of those things that I'm
That,
just
that,
so,
that seems like such a human thing,
oh,
not a
it's,
spiritual thing. So
no, yeah, very much,
I
very
think that's the
much.
difference. Well, and
Yeah.
imagine if you can choose, like when I choose to think back to my sweet Georgia, I absolutely think of the good days. She was a very tiny cat. She was very beautiful, but she was the most aggressive head bumper in the world. Like she would bruise people because she was constantly just ramming her face into you. And I choose every day. And I assume that if we really could think about it, rather than thinking about the what ifs, the I should have, they should have, we could have.
Right.
I guess if I choose, because I probably could have continued those subcutaneous fluids and kept around longer.
Yeah.
And at some point, it became apparent to me that that isn't what she needed,
Right.
and it wasn't fair. But I get to choose every day to remember the head boobs and not
Right.
that horrible, although a little ridiculous now when I think about the crying and the awfulness of the whole experience. But
Yeah.
yeah, we get to do that. And I think that being able, we talk about being flippant sometimes, and it's
Right.
really just it doesn't mean to be out of disrespect. It's literally just to open up the idea that we get to forgive, and it's messy and things aren't perfect, and we maybe
All of
said
it.
the wrong thing, and
Mhm.
although maybe it was the right, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Um, but that healing, that piece of forgiveness, if we can find it in our space to hold forgiveness for those around us and mostly for ourselves,
Yeah.
then when it is time to transition at the end of
Mhm.
life and while we're alive,
Right.
I think it just
Right.
speaks to being so much better for us. And also, you mentioned something about that I just don't want to gloss over. You
Right.
mentioned something about the person who is left behind who didn't give forgiveness to the dying person. I do want to say something about that.
Sure.
Forgiveness is in the person who was impacted upon. That is your healing. As Angie said, that is your timeline. So I don't ever want anyone to feel like they are required or rushed because somebody else's time is up. Um, and
Right.
that's really brave, and that's okay. I know I have had a person in that situation who had a parent that they were not in communication with anymore, and when they died,
Mhm.
that parent or some family members tried to kind of connect them, and
Mhm.
they chose not to.
Mhm.
And I I do not believe that that was the wrong choice for that person, the living
Right.
person.
Right.
And since then, that person has told me that they absolutely can now feel the connection between that soul, that person who died, and themselves. And somehow they are working through
Yeah.
like whatever that healing is that they need in their own time, in their own way. And
Right.
I know
Can't rush
sometimes,
it.
right, sometimes people are like, well, you have to because they'll be dead. And I know that's and you'll never get this chance again to talk
Right,
to them or see them. And which I absolutely understand the inclination to do that. We're all inclined to do that.
sure.
Um, I instead try to frame it, I want you to make this a very conscious decision. As you know, their time on this earth is limited. And as long as you know that anything you want to say, if you want to say
Mhm.
anything, now is the time. And if you don't want to say anything right now, then that's between your spirit later. Like you do it on
Right.
your time. But I think that that is a really important piece
Yes.
to remember, because sometimes I
Yeah.
do think that people, I too have felt like, what do you mean they didn't come? What do you mean they didn't come see him when he was dying because
Right.
he want, whatever. That
Right.
definitely in a different in my youth.
Right.
Um, that was
Right.
shocking to me.
Yeah.
Um, and now it's like, I mean, I
It's part of that understanding that everybody grieves differently. Everybody's going
right.
to handle someone else's death
Mhm.
differently, and yes, our inclination as humans, we're going to judge that. But, again, it's all messy, and only you have control over, don't force it, because then it's not genuine. And I would also counter and put an addendum on what you said, in the fact that, yes, their time on this planet is limited, but you can absolutely still communicate with them, and you can
Sure
still
can.
impact that healing on your own timeline. So I think that that's the piece of, yes, they're not physically here, and so it's harder for us as human beings to embody that connection of forgiveness, but it still can happen, because death isn't the end. They're
Right.
still living, and
Energy.
yeah, exactly. Now, I know we're kind of running out of time, and we may need to do this in another session, but
Okay.
I wanted to tag on to this with the whole concept of forgiveness. This article, I think I sent it to you.
Mhm.
This woman who had written about her personal experience of what she learned about death and dying from her mother, her elderly mother, who was dying of cancer. And, things like, nobody told me that it was going to be this. And what was interesting is the first thing she said is, nobody told me that I might be cruel. And she details her experience with the fact that, as a caretaker,
Mhm.
she's caring for her own kids, she's caring for her family, and now she's caretaking a mother who, this is a whole new routine that was not part of her family's routine. And it's very different. Cancer treatments and doctor's appointments that are in her day, and not to make it sound horrible, but throwing a wrench in things. And she would find herself feeling resentful. She would find herself snapping at her a little bit when her dementia would kick in. And that sounds, when we're sitting on the outside, it's like, oh, that's terrible that she's treating her mother that way. And certainly we don't advocate elder abuse. That's
No.
not a good thing. But we also have to recognize that as caretakers, in our humanness, we have our limits, and
Mhm.
we have to forgive ourselves. There are going to be days where you are on it and you are like this angel incarnate. And there are other days where you are going to trip and fall and make a mess of things. And
Mhm.
that's okay, because you get to try again. And so when that happens again, those spirits on the other side, they know you're doing everything. My cat, for crying out loud, continues to tell me through some of my readings that I've had, look, I know you did everything you could. I know you tried to feed me every flavor of food that there was
You
on the
did.
planet to try and find something that I liked. You did the best you could. They know that. And I think that helps us as we're living. The quicker we can forgive ourselves, make amends, oh, Mom, I'm so sorry that I snapped at you. I was just overloaded. I'm having a tough time. I'm doing the best that I can. Just something that simple can help not only your loved one
Mhm.
mend that and understand where you're coming from, but it helps you so that you're not carrying that burden, because otherwise all you're doing is you're just loading it up on your back and carrying that baggage with you, and it gets heavy. It gets heavy. You just lay it down. So that's it. I
Absolutely.
thought that was a really interesting article about the fact that we don't talk about that, yes,
Right.
we're here talking about, let's make the death process sacred, right? And that's
Mhm.
lovely, but sometimes it's not.
Also, right,
It's
yes,
also, yeah, also
but also
it
it's
is a
real.
shit show, right?
Right. That is a great article, by the way, and I had read that previously in one of my doula kind of
Oh, okay.
places. But that in and of itself, that's a great, we should actually plan that. So teaser,
Okay.
we will talk about all the things that she discovered and how those impacted. And one of the things that I love about her article and this idea of forgiveness and making amends right away is I do believe you are correct that my experiences watching people as they've kind of hit end of life or suddenly and having to learn about forgiveness. One thing I know that I try harder at and I'm hopefully better at is that I try to take ownership of the things I've done faster and not let it fester. Like it doesn't
Right.
mean that someone might not decide that they hate me and never want to talk to me,
Sure.
but and they get you. But the person that I was when I was 25, behaving a certain way, who never would have taken ownership for that. And now when I snap or something, it's like, I am so sorry that I behaved that way. And that wasn't about the situation. Clearly something else was happening and
Right.
XYZ. So
Right.
it's
Yeah.
about our experiences as we live.
Yeah, I think that's a good topic for us to consider next time, because that really speaks to how do we live better now,
Mhm.
in terms of we're going to mess up. Spoiler alert, you're going to screw up, people.
Yeah.
In every phase of your life, there's going to be a mistake, but the more that we can learn from it, then that impacts our healing. It impacts our ability to heal our relationships with others so that we can live better and we can die in peace.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and on that note, we will sign off. So grateful to have you with us. I know Laura and I just love doing these podcasts. It will be a couple of weeks before we put out our next one, but we're going to come back and we're going to talk about caretaking, that forgiveness of ourselves, how we navigate those messy situations when we're caring for someone who's in the dying process, and all of that. So please drop us some comments below if you have questions, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you, Laura. We'll see you guys
Love
next
you.
time.
Bye.
Bye.